Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the Human Element Series. This is episode 161. I'm Chris Hadnagy, your founder and host of Social Engineer. Not your founder, I'm the founder of Social Engineer and the Innocent Lives Foundation and the host of this podcast since 2009. As always, this episode is sponsored and brought to you by Social Engineer LLC. We're a premier servicing company for all your social engineering needs. If you have any indications by reading the news, everything is getting breached nonstop. And 90% or more of all these breaches have something to do with phishing, vishing, smishing, or other types of social engineering. We help companies protect against those things and learn how to defend. So you can check us out at social-engineer.com for more information. And if you're really interested in the topic of social engineering, you should come over and join our Slack channel. There's just about 1,000 people in there that are talking about the psychology and persuasion and influence, and probably after today, visual intelligence and all sorts of things in that topic, in that channel. We even have 7 people or so that found jobs already because we have a whole job board. So if you're interested in InfoSec and the space, please check it out in the show notes and come on over and hang out with us there on the Slack channel. We always want to say thanks to Clutch for the opening music. We love them. As you know, I'm a huge fan, and they allow us to use their songs, so we're very appreciative of that. And that brings us to the Innocent Lives Foundation. Please check it out at innocentlivesfoundation.org. I got to tell you how proud I am of my team. We closed the year with 405 cases done. So our team over there is working hard to find those who are trafficking children and harming children, and we work closely with law enforcement in being able to get those people arrested and apprehended. And we did that for 405 cases this year. It's quite amazing. I'm proud of that. Don't forget to check out the Human Behavior Conference. Our guest is going to be one of the trainers there. I'm so excited about it. March 22 through 24. And in 2022, down here in Orlando. No, did I say 22 through 24? Wow, I'm messing it up. It's March 24 through 26. And it's a 3-day conference at the Rosen Center Hotel here in Orlando. HumanBehaviorCon.com. Check it out. We call it Hubie for short. There's going to be so many amazing people there, and it's a really great place to come and connect with just other folks that are like-minded. Since you're a listener of the podcast, we're throwing out a discount code, $150 off your ticket if you use the code Hubie150. Okay, now let's get right to the good part of this. This month, we're joined by the fascinating Amy Herman. She's been on the show once, but it was a long time ago, and there's so many things that have happened since then. Amy's a lawyer and an art historian who uses works of art to sharpen observation, analysis, and communication skills. She developed a course called the Art of Perception, a seminar, which I have been privileged to take with my company. It was a while ago, but she developed that in 2000. And since then, she's worked with New York City Police Department, FBI, Department of Defense, Fortune 500 companies, and even tiny companies like mine. And she's been a TED speaker and an author of 2 books. With her latest book, we're going to talk a lot about. I'm definitely recommending that everyone here should read it. It's called Fixed: How to Perfect the Fine Art of Problem Solving. And it was just released, December of 2021. So it's brand new. It's hot off the press. And as I mentioned before, she's going to be joining us at the Human Behavior Conference and bringing up some of the fascinating topics that we're going to talk about today in a seminar training session. So, Amy, I cannot thank you enough for coming back on the show.
Oh, thank you, Chris. It's my pleasure to be here. What a thrill working with your company. It seems like all those years ago. I still remember that I left that session, I think, with my eyes open wider than I went in. So it's really an honor and a pleasure for me to be here, and I'm overjoyed that you have the book in your hands.
I am too. And because I got a chance to dig into it and start reading it. And just like everything you do, it's fascinating and wonderful.
Thank you.
I want to talk about it, but I think I want to start off by just tell us how you got to where you are today. Because reading your bio, you're a lawyer and a art historian. How are you now talking about problem solving and visual intelligence and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I definitely took a circuitous path to get here. I am a recovering lawyer. That's what I tell people. I'm a recovering attorney and an art historian. And I like to think that I took the practical aspects of each of those disciplines, legal analysis and visual analysis, and I combined them, mostly because it was a dislike of being a practicing attorney combined with a love of art history and thinking, well, how can I put the two together? And I created my company 20 years ago. When I left the private practice of law, I worked at a small museum here in New York City called the Frick Collection. And while I was at the Frick, I started this program. It was neither my idea nor rocket science. They were doing it at Yale. And the idea was to bring medical students out of the clinical setting, out of the hospital, bring them to an art museum, teach them how to analyze works of art. So when they return to that clinical setting, they'll be better observers of their patients. And with Yale's gracious permission, I started a version of that program in New York City. And it went beautifully. I had medical students coming and going, looking at works of art. Everything was great. But in 2004, I was telling friends of mine, I was out to dinner, that medical students didn't just have limited vision. Sometimes they had no vision. It was all about kidney stones and MRIs and blood problems. And one of my friends innocently said, "Why are you just doing this for medical students? Why aren't you doing this for people who look for a living?" I said, "Like whom?" He said, "Like cops. Why aren't you doing this for homicide detectives?" And I thought, I don't know. So the following Monday morning, I picked up the phone and I cold called the NYPD. Cold call. I even hate that phrase. There was nothing really cold about it.
Yeah.
And I was transferred 7 times. Nobody really knew what to do with me. And I finally got to a deputy commissioner who heard what I was saying. And 6 months later, every newly promoted captain had to come to the museum for my training. And in July of 2005, that collaboration hit the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
And that's when my world exploded. And that's when I got calls from all over the world. And it's now my honor and privilege to be working in every branch of the military. I work in counterterrorism. I work in financial services. I work for the FBI. I train CIA analysts. I work in special operations, retail, counterterrorism, shock and trauma nurses, and librarians, and beekeepers and prison wardens. And because everybody really needs to improve their visual intelligence. So that's how I got to where I am. And I've written these 2 books, and I have a third on the way. In June, it's going to be a young adult adaptation of my first book. So kids 9 to 13 can rethink about how they engage with the world and to think about how to say what they see.
That's amazing.
So that's where I am.
What a great idea.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that now makes a lot more sense as I'm reading Fixed here with your story about starting off in the medical field, one of the things I found that was applicable to me as a story in your book is how you would have doctors and nurses together. Mm-hmm. But then you realized that was not great because of how they communicate so different and their needs are so different.
That's right.
And I was thinking about, wow, sometimes in our industry, we'll do that. Someone's really, really great at a job. Mm-hmm. So we bump them up to a new position that they're not that great at. Mm-hmm. And then we think, we'll just put you in training with other people that are like that, and then you'll get better. And it's being able to see, how did you, my question with that is, how did you get to that conclusion? How did you get there where you were like, oh, this is not right because these 2 people have very different needs from the very same class?
It comes from a very, very personal experience. I am proud and full of gratitude and honored to say that I'm a cancer survivor. And I went through what so many people have gone through. We either walk that walk with ourselves, with our family members and our loved ones. And it was during my cancer treatment, not only did I see the very, very different roles of doctors and nurses, but when I train nurses quite a bit, I work with medical students, doctors, and nurses. But I remember, I think I recount in the book, a nurse once said to me, the question they like the very least is when people say, "Why didn't you go to medical school?" Mm-hmm. And nurses take offense because they're very, very different roles. And what happens is we pigeonhole people in our perceptions. We think doctors, nurses, medical care, but they have very different roles. Doctors are there to diagnose and treat, and nurses are there to provide safe, effective, and compassionate care. And those are very different things. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, but nurses, and eventually, they all cross lines. Sometimes you have different levels of nursing, but doctors diagnose and treat, and nurses provide safe, effective, and compassionate care. Mm-hmm. And so those are very different. And I realized once I was able to sort of bifurcate and think about the different levels of care between doctors and nurses, it's really applicable across the board. We pigeonhole people. We say, well, so-and-so is a great grant writer, or so-and-so is really good at analytics. But I think we have to bring in a certain agility and let people rise to other occasions and let them tell us what they're good at and what they want to try. So that's how we make better teams.
Mm-hmm. That's, I love that whole thought. And it sends me down so many tunnels because I feel like you could take what you just said and really apply that to anything.
Agreed.
I mean, literally anything in your life. Mm-hmm. And I know this is like a loaded question, but is there an equation or a secret how an everyday average person who's not you could look at a situation and think like that? Like figure out how can I use that skill?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you an analogy from Mother Nature because, Mother Nature rules us all. There is a phenomenon that occurs in nature in certain species of trees. When certain species of trees get to a certain height and a place in their growth, if you ever look up in the woods or you're on a trail and you look up, you'll notice that the trees form these beautiful patterns and they get out of each other's way because they have to let the sunlight in, otherwise everything beneath them will die. And this phenomenon has a name. It's called crown shyness. Crown shyness. It means that the trees naturally separate and form these exquisite patterns to make sure that sunlight can get through because the grove still has to be illuminated. And if you apply that to leadership or professional situations, we can't get tangled up in each other's egos and work and competitiveness because everything below us will die. When you are good at something, get out of each other's way. Be the trees. You're all in the same forest. You are all growing together, but get out of each other's way so the light can come through so everything beneath you thrives instead of dies. Isn't that crazy? You just took every word away. Well, I'll give you one more visual, Chris, while we're talking about the way I found out about crown shyness. Honestly, I am too old for red-eye flights, but sometimes you have to take them. Sometimes there's just no way to get from point A to point B without taking a red-eye. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning. Everyone's snoring on the plane, and the pilot gets on really quietly and says, "Folks, if anyone is awake, we're flying over the Ozarks, and if you're on the right side of the plane, I want you to look out your window and you'll see the most beautiful examples of crown shyness you have ever seen." And the pilot told us about the trees forming this and I looked down and frankly, I was pretty tired. It kind of looked like a head of broccoli, but when I looked carefully, there were these gorgeous lines and patterns among the treetops because I was looking from the air and I thought that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And it had a name, crown shyness. And when I think about leadership and when I think about teamwork, get out of each other's way. You're good, you're tall, you're strong, but give other people the room so the light comes in. I just love the concept.
I'm writing it down. So when you say it's shy, like being shy, shyness.
So the crowns are shy of each other. Yeah. They pull back. And what's better than a leader to pull back and let other people shine? It's such a beautiful concept. And the idea of the trees working together to let the light in for everyone beneath them. Every leader needs to let the light in. And it's not about your ego. It's about fostering and encouraging the teams below you. Crazy.
I can't even tell you how applicable this is to some things I'm working on right now.
Wonderful. That makes me very happy.
I feel like I'm in a combination of a therapy session and the best business consulting I've ever had.
Awesome. Makes me very happy.
This is great. Wow. Okay. Look, I could talk about that forever, but I really, really want to talk about this book. Okay.
But promise me you'll Google crown shyness.
I am. I wrote it down because I'm gonna be looking into that.
Spectacular.
So for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, this is what the book looks like. It's called Fixed: How to Perfect the Fine Art of Problem Solving. Now, full honesty, I've not made it through yet because I just got it, right? But I am into the beginning chapters and I am drawn and fascinated, just like you did when you came and taught my company. You use these crazy pieces of art. That one about the Medusa I don't want to ruin it for anyone. That story is horrific. I've seen that piece of art before.
Yeah.
Never knew the background.
Yep.
And now I'm reading this and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then you start telling about how the people, he didn't get what he deserved at all. No. That captain. No. I'm like, this is I probably saw that painting. I've seen it in person, never walked away from it and went, wow, that was cool. That was really nicely done. Never knew the story. And now when I see it again, I'm probably going to just stand there and stare at it thinking, oh my gosh.
And I'm sorry, I brought a harrowing experience to the fore. Most people look at the painting and think, wow, that's a big painting. They look at it and walk away. And now I've told you all the horrors that have occurred.
Yes. But how did you come about with the idea for this book?
Well, it was very interesting because, as you know, I wrote a book 5 years ago, Visual Intelligence, and I said to my agent, I am not writing a book until I have something to say, because I was so tired. We've analogized writing a book to giving birth. I was exhausted from giving birth to that book. And I said, I'm not going to write anything until I have something to say. And as we were talking, we had regular conversations. She said, your business is growing. Tell me, what is the common thread, from special operations Navy SEALs and surveillance agents and, red hat hackers? And what is the common thread? Why are all these people seeking out your services? And I said, let me get back to you. Let me think about that. And I realized everybody was reaching out to me. The one thing that they all had in common, everybody had a problem. And this was prior to the pandemic. Everyone had a problem that they needed to solve. And when the traditional remedies and strategies didn't pan out for them, you know what? Let's go talk to Amy Herman. She's out there. And we know she works with people in our field. Let's bring her in. So I realized that everybody had a problem, and that looking at art, I wrote about that looking at art is very powerful. And I decided to channel that power of analyzing works of art to help people solve their problems. And I took it one step further. I realized in the process of creating art, and I am ferociously uncreative, I am not an artist. Every single artist started with a problem. There was inspiration, and they had to transfer that inspiration to a medium, to paint, sculpture, photography. How did they do it, and what problems did they overcome? So I decided to use the artist creative process as a template for solving problems.
I just want to argue with you on one point.
Yep.
You say you're not creative.
Oh, no.
This is creation. You created something, and you literally just sat here and I did not prepare that question with you, and you gave me the answer to so many things. I don't know how you can call yourself not creative. That is amazing.
Well,
so I want to be argumentative there for a minute.
Thank you. I'll let you be argumentative there.
But I love that idea because you did that in the training that you made, that seminar that you created, in using art. Because I remember when I first met you and we talked, and I was like, okay, this is interesting, but I can't see how it's going to apply to my business. And then you made it apply to social engineering, to the thing where I'm like, this arts can't apply to hacking. And we left that class all going, whoa, I'm looking at things completely different. Then you took this now and you brought it out. Like, I love the story of the doctors and nurses, and then how you got into the NYPD, because that again was just like a stroke of, why aren't you doing this for everyone?
Right.
And you put this now into the pages of this book, but like, I don't want to give away I don't want you to give it away, because I want people to go read it, but I'm just curious, like, what is your hope? Like, someone grabs this book, reads it. Yeah, I know you say that you're helping them do critical thinking and problem solving, but what is the hope that you want for people who read this? The
hope, as I'm listening to you talk, is what you just outlined. Because what I want people to realize as they're approaching all kinds of problems, because if anything is constant in this pandemic, we're drowning in problems, right? But when you talked about hackers, and you wondered how this was going to be applicable to social engineering, before people are hackers, before they are doctors, before they are nurses, they are all human. And the name of your conference is Human Behavior. So what I want people to realize is, in the intelligence world, when we're missing a critical piece of information, we call it an intel gap. There's always an intel gap. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. Yeah. But what I want people to realize as a result of reading this book and thinking about the artist process and thinking about our problems, you always have another source of information to go to when problem solving. You can always default to your humanity, always. And we all have that in common. And so when you're trying to teach people about hacking and phishing, behind all of that, behind the AI, there's always a human mind. Even though AI is, everywhere and everything, there's always a human brain. And so we need to default to that humanity. So regardless of the profession in which I'm working, whether it's medicine or intelligence or surveillance, to remind people that we are human and we have a very, very rich source of data to fall back on to help us solve our problems.
I love it. I love it because
your own conference brings it out, human behavior.
That's why I think I love it. It's just because it ties in so well.
Yeah.
Now, the last 18 months have been world changing. right? The things that have occurred, not just here in America, but across the globe, have literally changed how we are as humans, how we communicate, how we work. Mm-hmm. How has that affected the information that like this concepts that you came up with of visual intelligence? Mm-hmm. How has that changed? How's the last 18 months changed those concepts?
Well, I think I'm going to start on the back end of that question and say, well, what has remained constant? And what has remained constant pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and after the pandemic? Two things. Number one, time is still our most precious commodity.
Yes.
We've just had to allocate time differently, because just because you might be in your pajamas all day doesn't mean that you don't have to be productive. So time has taken on different parameters. So we have to think about it differently. So when we look at art, we look at it from different angles. We're looking at the same piece of art, but when you look at it on a screen or you look at it in a video as opposed to a book or in real life, you're looking at different angles. But the other thing that I think has evolved in the pandemic is that we have to reconfigure how we embrace the unfamiliar. Okay, here's a perfect example. My world came to a hard stop, as did almost everybody's, March 13th, 2020. It was my last flight. Came in from Rome. Who goes to Rome before a pandemic? Okay. And I do, as you know, in-person presentations. I teach people art either in a museum or at a conference or in a presentation. And that stopped. Hard, full stop.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what am I going to do? I was the proverbial deer in the headlights, and it wasn't pretty. I thought, well, what am I going to do? And the trip that I had come back from in Rome, I was teaching officials at NATO. They brought me to the NATO Defense College in Rome. And when NATO called, they called me in March and they said, Signora Herman, we enjoyed your presentation. Would you do it for us virtually? And my first response was, well, no, I don't do virtual presentations. But my second response was, well, you don't say no to NATO.
Right.
So I said to them, I'll try. I've never done this before. I have to learn how to do this, but I will try. And so the visual I want to give you is NATO pushed me to the edge of the cliff. They pushed me off and my wings came out and I flew. Yeah. And I pivoted. I used that awful word. I pivoted to virtual presentations. Nobody likes being on screen all the time, but if you didn't adapt to it, you're going to get left behind. You don't have the option of saying, you know what, I don't participate in virtual meetings. It's not an option. So you need to embrace the unfamiliar. You don't have to love it. But, a small, tiny point on this, there are people that don't turn their cameras on. And I want to say, I don't care if you're in pajamas. I don't care if your kid is sitting on your lap. It's bad enough that I can only see you from the neck up. Let me see you from the neck up, because there's something, I need to see your face. I need to see your eyes. So embracing the unfamiliar has exponentially more importance during the pandemic.
I love that messaging. It's funny. You and I sound like we're twins. So pandemic hit. I was doing all my training live. People would ask me constantly, can you do virtual before pandemic? And I would always say, no, this class can never be virtual. It's impossible. You have to be in person. Pandemic happens. March, same thing. I'm at a conference. The world shuts down. And I had 2 training classes scheduled filled with people. And I'm like, we have to cancel them. So I start sending people messages, we're going to refund their money. And they go, no, we just do it virtually. And I'm like, can't, what am I saying? I can't do it virtually? Am I going to give people all this money back? Like, this is a huge chunk. And I'm like sitting there going, what am I going to do? And I'm like, well, let's try. And I made a rule. What you said is like just so perfect. I said, okay, guys, if we're going to do this, then we're treating this like a real classroom. You come with your camera on.
Right.
Because I am not teaching a 5-day class virtually for 8 hours a day to a bunch of blank black squares. Not happening. So, and I said, if you could say yes to this or you can get a refund. That's your choices, right? And I'm like, if you're in a class and you need to stand up because your back hurts, you stand up. So do that on camera. If you need to go get a coffee, go get a coffee. Do it on camera, right? We don't care. I want to be like, and it kicked off. I can't believe it.
By default. And you said, oh my God, this is so much more amazing than I could have imagined. Yes. And mind you, there is no substitute for face-to-face. There is no substitute for being in the room. But when they talk about the next best thing, I mean, I couldn't believe, and I want you to picture one more thing. for me, for the power of art and visual images. If you remember from your session, I have no words in my presentation. It's all visual images. So when I did the session for NATO, 29 countries, I would say more than half of them, English was not the first language for the participants. And I'm thinking, my very first Zoom presentation, half of them don't speak English as their first language. And I knew it was okay at the end because the moderator said, now, before we have Q&A, we all get up, go get an espresso, come back to the computer, and we have Q&A. And it was brilliant. I mean, I said I should incorporate espresso at the end for all my clients, whether they're in Italy or not.
Yes.
It was so wonderful. But I realized that art transcends the screen, and it ended up being a respite for people to actually look at these beautiful objects on the screen. And I took it from there. And I said, you know what, let's leverage this. People are looking at bullet points all day. Let me give them beautiful art to look at. And I've been able to not just survive. My other goal is to steal from Winston Churchill, who said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Yeah. And my goal is to get my clients to thrive, not just survive.
So this is a completely off topic, but are you planning on keeping virtual training even as we get back to whatever new normal is?
That's a very good question. And I think by default, virtual training is going to continue. As I said to a colleague the other day, nobody's going to fly me to China to speak for 2 hours again. And that did happen, but that's never going to happen again. Nobody's going to fly me to China. So I think to be pragmatic about it and to be perfectly practical and reasonable, yes, I think some virtual trainings are going to continue. Yeah. Would I ever give up in person? No. For the in-person trainings, that I've been able to continue because they're military and those things still continue. And for those clients who've really gone out on a limb and said, okay, we're going to bring you, it's so wonderful to be in a room with people. So I'm going to use that horrible H word. I think there is going to be a hybridization. Mm-hmm. It's never going to be 100% one or the other. But as I teach in the book, we have to roll with it. We need to adapt, and we need to rethink where we are, our situational awareness every day.
Yeah, I found pandemic was an interesting time for Western cultures because maybe we almost were arrogantly thinking, well, this is what happens in third world countries.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, the most powerful countries on the planet came to a screeching halt and went, I don't know what to do.
They were on their knees, Chris. Yeah. They were on their knees begging for mercy. And, I had a wake-up call to that. One of the upsides of the pandemic is I've been able to bring my presentation to countries and places that couldn't bring me for logistical and financial reasons. Mm-hmm. And I did a presentation in Zambia, and it was just glorious. And I made the horrible faux pas of saying, we've never faced anything like this in our lifetimes. Well, Africa, they've faced many pandemics. Yeah. They have faced things that we have not. And they corrected me. And I said, I stand corrected. You have faced these. We in the Western world have not. And because of that, we are just incredibly unprepared. And egregiously unprepared. So we've learned the hard way.
It's interesting, right? When you get to speak to other cultures, their viewpoints on the pandemic, it kind of makes me realize how spoiled I am. Right?
You know what? It also makes me realize that our cultural landscape isn't the only one out there.
Yes.
The idea of understanding not just other people's work, but their cultural landscape, where they live, how they engage. The pandemic has made us global. It's an upside. Yeah. We've all suffered with this. And one of the worst things that I heard during the pandemic that I can't stand is when everyone says, we're all in the same boat. No, we're not. We were never in the same boat. No. We're all in the same storm. Yeah. And what I hope when this storm starts to abate and we can take a look around again and reassess our situational awareness, that we're going to realize we're still not in the same boat. And let's look at people for the strengths and weaknesses and capabilities and boats that they're in and work with them accordingly. I
agree with you. I mean, through the pandemic, I never went without food. I never went without fresh water. I never went without internet or cell phone. Absolutely. I never went out with the ability to watch a movie on Netflix. Absolutely. There wasn't a time where I was without. The thing I was without, I couldn't go to a restaurant. Right. I couldn't go to a theme park. I couldn't get on a plane. Right. Those are the things I was without. I was without luxury. That's it.
That was it.
Necessity, I had it all.
As the barista in my neighborhood said, they closed the coffee shop and she looked at me and she said, I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent. I wasn't in her shoes.
No.
I mean, the pandemic, her source of income shut down. Yeah. And it's not as if she could go to another coffee shop and get a job. All the coffee shops in Midtown had shut down. Yeah. So to reorient ourselves to the idea that we're in different boats and to act accordingly and think accordingly, I hope there's a renewed appreciation for that.
And I think that applies to your topic here, right? Because I think part of problem solving, like you said it before, is realizing that there's a human behind every problem. And if we can understand the human more, it may help us to be more empathetic in understanding the problem, I would imagine.
You've just described a whole chapter at the end of the book, and it's called Finding Common Ground. Once we realize that, yes, we're all in different boats and we have different resources, if we're going to attempt to solve problems, we do have to find common ground. And sometimes that means looking more than skin deep and looking at people's cultural landscapes and looking at their situations. But once you find that common ground, you have a place to leverage and say, look, here we are together. Let's solve this problem. What's that old proverb? I wish I knew the origin. It's an African proverb. And they said, if you want to go fast, go yourself. But if you want to go far, let's go together.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that great? And so it's the idea of assessing where you are and realizing that you can go much farther when you find common ground and you collaborate. And, if you want to go fast, you're on your own. And if you go fast and you don't go with anybody else, you're going to have to do it all over again anyway.
I'm writing that one down too, man. You got gems here. You got just little gold nuggets you keep.
To think, Chris. This pandemic's given me a lot of thinking and writing time.
Yes. Obviously, since you're coming out with another, I don't know if I could have done another book right after. Woo.
You know what? It was all about the wonderful readers and participants I had. So many people were stuck at home with their kids. And I don't mean stuck at home in a bad way, but it was quite a shift. You went from school to remote learning. Yeah. And one of my clients innocently said, God, I wish I had visual intelligence for my kids. It would be so engaging. So I put a deck together and I put it out on social media. And I said, for any of my friends and colleagues who have kids at home, here's a deck that's kid friendly and teaches them about situational awareness, engaging and thinking about what they see. And my agent said, let's turn it into a book. So the book is called SMART, small s, small m, capital ART, use your eyes to boost your brain. And so,
I love your agent, by the way.
She's awesome.
I love an agent that like she's there thinking for you about how to make your message bigger and broader.
Yes, she is. Absolutely. And she said, this isn't just for social media. You need to make a book about this. Yeah. And people are so excited. It's for ages 9 to 13. Yeah. And the 3 concepts are to think about what we see, to think about how to think about what we see, or it's how to see, how to think about what we see, and how to talk about what we see for kids.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, it's very fun.
One of the concepts you have in your book is talking about, and I might say it wrong, but it's pertinent negative?
Yes, pertinent negative.
Can you explain what that is, first of all, and then why it's such an important skill that we need to know about?
The pertinent negative has evolved to be, I think, not just a critical life skill, but something that is so important for all of us, regardless of what we do professionally. I didn't steal it. It's a concept from emergency medicine. And the pertinent negative means to say what you don't see in addition to what you do see to actually give a more accurate picture of what you're looking at. So the concept is, in medicine, if a patient comes into the emergency room, and let's say the attending physician thinks the patient has pneumonia, let's say. Pneumonia has 3 symptoms. She sees symptom 1, she sees symptom 2. But if symptom 3 is conspicuously missing, you need to say it's not there. It's the pertinent negative, because if it's not there, it's not pneumonia. And so the idea of saying what you don't see in addition to what you do see. So I'll give you a stunning example, and it's a wartime example of how the pertinent negative works. And I know it sounds counterintuitive to talk about what we don't see, but think about how it stretches your brain to see things on the other side. So in World War II, the Royal Air Force sent their planes out to fight, and they suffered heavily at the hands of the Germans, anti-aircraft fire. And the planes that came back were really heavily damaged. And the Royal Air Force didn't have a lot of resources to reinforce the planes. So that they said, well, how do we reinforce the planes to get them back out to fight? And everyone said, well, let's just fix the damage and send the planes out. But a certain mathematician, he was thinking about the pertinent negative, and he said, no, you're thinking about this the wrong way. Let's look at the planes where they weren't damaged and fix and reinforce those areas, because planes that were hit in those areas didn't come back.
Ooh.
Think about that. You get on the other side of the issue.
Wow.
You ask the question, what didn't happen, and how do you act accordingly? So in terms of hacking, okay, think about it this way. You have certain expectations of what's going to happen in a hacking situation, But do you ever talk about what didn't happen in a hacking situation? Say what didn't happen. Say what was protected. Say what wasn't damaged. And then you're giving a more complete picture of what the hack actually looks like. And then you have a better sense of the threat going forward because you can say, this occurred, but this didn't occur. That's how the pertinent negative is useful.
I think we should charge people like $10,000 for this podcast. You're gonna change things right now.
I hope so. You know what, Chris? There's nothing greater than when, there are presenters and there are speakers, but when there's presenters and speakers with impact that change the way people see and do their work, that's worth everything to me. That's all I want to do is help people see and engage in their world. Yeah, well,
okay. I know we got to keep moving, so I got a question.
Okay.
The cover.
Yeah. Isn't it beautiful?
This story that you told me needs to be out in the world because this cover is ridiculous, first of all, in a beautiful way, a beautiful piece of art. But when you tell the story, I think this is going to blow people's minds.
Okay. Well, I'm always happy to promote the art of the artist. Her name is Kumi Yamashita, and she's one of my favorite artists in the world. And what Kumi Yamashita did, I'm going to hold this up so people can see what I'm talking about. What the cover is, and I know the light in my apartment is tough, it's showing a group of blocks, and it's showing the silhouette, the shadow of a woman's silhouette in profile. But what most people don't realize is that that silhouette is a product of the shadows of the blocks combined. So what Kumi Yamashita did is she didn't just think of the blocks as blocks. She thought about what shadows those blocks would cast, and she arranged them in a seemingly random way, but they're anything but random, so that when she shows a single light through those blocks, together they comprise the silhouette shadow. And her series is called Building Blocks. And I have a slide. These blocks are on a wall, and they're in Tokyo. And when she shines the light through the blocks, she doesn't just see them for their properties as blocks, but what kind of shadows will they cast? And that's why I put this on the cover with Kumi Yamashita's gracious permission, because I want people to understand in the process of problem solving that our lives can be a hot, steaming mess. And all you need is one source of illumination to pull it all together and create a beautiful silhouette. And I will tell you, this image is illustrative of what happened to me in the pandemic. Every morning I'd wake up and my first question would be, okay, what day is it? Because everything looks the same when you're in an 850 square foot apartment. Everything looks the same. And as I would start to pull it all together for my son, for my family, for my clients, my relationships, my stakeholders, I had to have that perfect silhouette by the time I had my first cup of coffee. So I needed to pull all those pieces together. And some days it was easier than others, I'll be honest with you. But this is what I did every day. And you know what? I think everybody out there had to pull it together like this every day. And I want to help be that source of light. I want to be that unexpected source of light that can help make order out of chaos. And that's how we got to the cover. And that's why I hope it's an effective cover. And you notice there's no dust jacket. It's the cover. Yeah. And I love that you can hold it and look at it. And I'm so happy with it. I really am.
The story makes it so much more impactful because when I saw the cover, I thought it was cool. I thought it was interesting. I wanted to understand why it was there, but I never thought it was real. I didn't think that I thought it was staged. Like there's some blocks, right? And then there's a silhouette. There's a woman's face or head. I didn't think it was actually a real silhouette. So now you tell this story of how this person was able to imagine how these angular blocks, these triangles, squares, ovals, semicircles, all are somehow going to make a face.
Isn't that life though, Chris? We have all the pieces of our lives. We don't know how it's going to come together. Some days I don't know how I'm going to get dinner on the table. How am I going to take all the pieces and make sure that it ends up okay? And better than okay, I want it to be beautiful. How do I make sure that I take all these disparate pieces in my life, my work, my travel, my clients, the world writ large that's falling apart? How do I make sure that I can read and feed my family and pay my bills and pull it all together, not just to pull it all together, but to make it beautiful? That is using your visual intelligence. That's seeing things for greater than the sum of the parts that they are.
It's just beautiful. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Oh, Amy, I can literally talk to you for hours.
Yes.
I can. I think at the Human Behavior Conference, we're going to end up doing that. Just sitting and talking for hours.
I look forward to it.
Me too.
I am so excited to come away from that conference more enlightened than I came in. I can't wait to exchange ideas with everybody, and I'm really honored to participate.
I love it because, somebody asked me once on an interview, why did you make this conference? And I said, I made a conference that I wanted to go to.
There you go.
That's what I did. I said,
that's the best answer.
I said, I went out and I said, there's not a group of the people that I look up to, I respect, that I want to learn from, that gather anywhere on earth. They're all separate places. So I said, I'm going to make one. I'm going to make one that has all the people I want to learn from and that I have learned from.
I love it. And to have a conference entitled Human Behavior. Who wouldn't want to learn more about human behavior? Who wouldn't?
Yeah. Right.
So
I'm with you.
I'm just thrilled. I really am. And thank you for reading the book and thinking about it. I really appreciate
I love
that.
it. So besides the books, your books that we'll put in the show notes, I always ask our guests, because we have a large audience that loves to read. What are some of your favorite books? And that could be about any topic, like one or two books that you just truly love, that you found like changed your life, or that you would want everyone to read.
Yes. And this, I run the risk of having said this the last time I was on your podcast, but there was a book that I read, and it was years ago, and it's called The Boys in the Boat. Did we ever talk about The Boys in the Boat? That
does not ring a bell to me.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you the author's name because I want to make sure that I get it right. And what it's about, and in the boat, Boys in the Boat, it's called 9 Americans and Their Quest for the Gold. And the author's name is Daniel James Brown. And the reason it's one of my favorite books to read is it's about the underdog. It's about a team from the University of Washington. In the early 20th century, they were rowers. And it made you understand. And they got the gold when Hitler wanted the Germans to get the gold, and the Americans got it. And it was about teamwork, and that no one team member on that crew boat could be better than the others, because if one fails, they all fail. And not only is it about the idea of teamwork and individuality and working together and thinking about strengths and weaknesses, and not to make a terrible pun on what we were talking about, everyone being in the same boat, but it also reminds me of one of the concepts that I talk about in this book. It's all interrelated. The concept is called festina lente, and that means to make haste slowly. And it's something we all need to practice, because if you are looking at a hacking situation, of course, time is of the greatest importance. But if you don't make that haste slowly and purposefully and carefully, you're going to have to do it all over again. And so the concept of festina lente, never is it better than in rowing. Of course, you want to win the race. Of course, you want to cross the finish line before anybody else. But if your oars are not in sync with everybody else, if you're not communicating, if you don't have a coxswain, if you're not following the direction to row, you're going to lose. So it's haste. It's mindful haste. And so the book talks about
mindful haste.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great concept.
And so that book, The Boys in the Boat, has stayed with me all these years, about how they built the strength of a team, how they came from behind, and they defied expectations. To what did they do? They solved a problem. They beat the Germans in the 1932 Olympics.
Wow. Thank you. And that's a great way to pump the book up.
There you go. Festina lente.
Yes,
right?
Yes, I love it. Who would you say is your biggest mentor in your life?
That's a very good question. I have a lot of people that I draw wisdom from, a lot of people. And because I work across the professional spectrum, I draw wisdom. I'm very fortunate to draw wisdom from people in the arts, people in leadership, people in the military. But there's somebody who I've been reading a lot about lately, and I really have profound admiration, and it's politics aside. It's Angela Merkel. And the reason I say that is because she had a position of power, but she had such strong feelings about her country, and her country with all its foibles, its strengths, its weaknesses, with an idea of righting the wrongs of World War II. She didn't care what people said about her clothes. She cleaned her own house. She was a whole real person who she just oozed authority and compassionate authority. and she embraced people and problems for what they are. And that's what I want to do. I want to look at people, take people as they are, and help them be better. And I think for Germany, and again, politics aside, not right wing, left wing, it's not that. She looked at Germany's past and she said, we need to write our past and we need to keep going forward. Her eye to the past to look forward. And I do that with art. I look back at art to propel us forward to see more effectively. So while I'm very lucky to draw strength and be a mentee to a lot of people, I look to Angela Merkel as how to engage in the world.
Wonderful. That's a great answer. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a good question.
Amy, you are just fascinating as always.
Thank you. So nice to talk to you.
Oh, so wonderful. You're just
really fun.
A wonderful, positive energy, and I can't wait to be together with you in March, and I can't wait to finish this book.
In the same room. I am looking forward to it.
Me too.
Thanks for having me as a guest. Great time.
Not a problem. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll see you guys all next month.